oddly enough. And I also am a registered teacher with the Chopra Institute for Ayurveda, and I'm working towards getting my meditation certificate as well. So today we are ending our series on how to listen well. We've spent a lot of time talking about the things that get in the way of listening, and it's really good to know what these things are from the onset. I mean, you can't practice listening well if you don't know what tends to get in the way of listening. But today we're going to talk about a couple techniques that will help you become a better listener. And the thing is, I think we're all pretty bad listeners, especially here in the United States. We are really good at monologues. We're really good at telling our own point of view and our own beliefs, but we're really poor at listening to other people. And there's a lot of reasons why. The big one, as I mentioned on Tuesday, is really this cultural aspect in which the emphasis on I and me and my needs get in the way of our ability to listen to the needs of others, no matter how much we love them. We have these kind of cultural competition tendencies that are really ingrained in our bodies here in the United States. And competition is great, but it's not great when you're trying to listen. It gets in the way. So we're going to talk about some things that you can do today. And we're going to end on a meditation in which I give you a small practice on something you can do to learn how to become a better listener. And I highly suggest you do this once a day, because not only will it help you with your own peace of mind in everyday life when you're not in a conversation or you're not trying to communicate to others, but it will help you communicate better to yourself as well, because we are poor listeners to our own selves as well. It's terrible, but it's true. We spend a lot of time tearing ourselves up and out and not trying to figure out why we do so. So some things to consider. The number one thing for listening is to become the observer. And we were talking yesterday a little bit about the presidential debate, that first debate. And as I'm sure you've seen in the news now, well, in general, people didn't really feel like there was any listening. There was a lot of arguments. There was a lot of name calling. There was tons of competition, but there really wasn't any listening. So if either Vice President Biden or President Trump had come to me and said, hey, tell me how I could do this better, I'd say you need to become the observer. Really listen to what is being said before you react. Because whenever you see people make a total change in topic, such as we saw during the debates, you know they're not listening. They only have their own agenda. It's in their back pocket, and they're going to get that agenda out regardless of how it makes them look. And of course, this actually made both of them look not so good during those presidential debates. I mean, if you go on Twitter, you have conservatives, but you also have Democrats going, what the hell was that train wreck? And it was a train wreck because there were no debate skills really being present. There was no listening to rules. There was no listening to each other. They certainly didn't listen to the moderator. So listening is important because really, in the end, no matter who you might have thought won that particular debate, I have a hard time believing that you're going to walk away from the debate that we all watched earlier and think to yourself, my goodness, those guys did a really good job debating each other. I didn't see that anywhere. I looked in all social media and I saw a lot of projections about who they thought won. People thought won, but not a lot of happy discussions about, wow, that was a great debate. That really made sense to me. It didn't, because when we're in the mode of our own agenda, we get in the way of actually communicating, and we get in the way of having our message received. When you experience communication as a chaotic space, such as we saw during the debate, you just want to turn off. It's also like that person who gets up on a hill and starts monologuing about what they believe and not taking any time to listen to other arguments. We turn off to that. We're not interested, especially if we are not their audience. And that's another thing. Listening is important because if you're trying to get people to decide to vote for you, let's say they haven't made their decision yet. They're kind of going, I don't know, Biden, Trump. And is this all I have? And then they look at third parties, which they know probably won't win. But so there's this examination, right? And if they're both acting poorly, then you're not going to convince anybody. If you're only speaking to your own audience, as my cat says, you've lost the game. Hi, Harpo. Harpo wants to join us. Say hello. Say hello to the world, Harpo. All right. So the best thing to do in these situations is to get out of the competition. Yes, you are trying very hard to convince other people to vote for you or to agree with your opinion or whatever it happens to be at the time. But if you are only speaking to your own audience, as we all mostly do anymore, you're not winning. And it's not really about winning, but you certainly aren't succeeding. The idea for a debate or for most conversations is to try to get on the same page. Remember, communication is a transactional process, which means it's a constant negotiation between participants as they try to agree to different meaning, as they land on different things in which they can find connections with. So when we're listening, it's vital that we become the observer. And I know we've talked tons about being the observer. I'll talk tons more about it because when it comes to living in life, you are doing yourself such a favor by becoming the observer. So let's just refresh that idea. When we become the observer, the very simple thing is we're not so engaged in that moment that we lose ourselves. We are not so engaged in that moment, so we lose ourselves. What does it mean to lose ourselves? Well, you've probably been there more than once. You have an emotional day, and the anxiety is up, and the stress is up, and the pressure is up, right? And you can't hear anything else. Now, we all have different physical signs that tells us that we've lost the ability to observe the moment in any rational way. For myself, sounds become like a cacophony. They become extra loud, they become overwhelming, and I can't focus on anything but that. So that's my own personal thing. And I challenge you to figure out what your personal thing is, because when we get so lost in the moment, so lost into the emotions of that moment, we can't hear. We can't hear other people. We even can't hear ourselves well because there's so much noise going on when we are stuck in that emotional space. So to be the observer is not to totally detach from the emotions, but it really is just to be able to recognize this is an emotional conversation. I'm in an emotional space or whatever it is, and to back off a little bit. It doesn't mean that you stop feeling the emotions. They're still there. You're just not letting them control you. And emotions control us on a very profound level. And it doesn't mean that you have to become Spock. Although the character Spock on Star Trek was a great observer. But you don't have to be that detached. You just have to be in a space that you're actively working against the emotions controlling you on a profound level. So to be the observer is to be present, to be in the moment but not lost by the moment, and to be able to have the freedom, and it is freedom, to choose how you're going to react, what you're going to say, how you're going to negotiate meaning with another human being or with yourself. Because that's what communication is about, is this process of coming to agreed upon meaning, and it's not easy. I mean, we often think it's easy, but it's really, really not. It's because of our perceptions, right? We each have different perceptions of things, and we may share 1, 2, 3 aspects of that particular perception, but we don't share them all. And the assumption sometimes is that we share them all, but it's important to understand we don't. And so when we're trying to communicate with each other, we are actively negotiating meaning over and over and over again. And we're refining that meaning a great deal. And we can only do this well when we are not totally engaged in absolute emotional turmoil. So the emotions are there, but we don't get lost in them. And that offers us the freedom to make choices of how we're going to respond, the questions we're going to ask. And I guess the best way to look at this is like a carousel. And I think I talked about this yesterday. In a carousel, you have the horses going around like this. And then there's a pole right in the middle of the carousel, right? Imagine that you are that pole. You're not disengaged. Matter of fact, you are extremely engaged. You are the reason, in some ways, that the carousel is going around. But you're not becoming too invested in this horse or that bunny rabbit or whatever characters happen to exist on that carousel. You're looking at them all. You're absorbing them all. You're making meaning out of them all. So to become the observer, we really need to practice some mindfulness exercises that will help ground us. And we're going to practice one today in our meditation. But what it does is it allows us to observe life without getting so involved that we can't see the other things around us. And so one of the processes, though, as a communicator is to start to observe the noise that is getting in the way of your ability to listen and or communicate well. The first off is, of course, the physical noises. We haven't talked about that, but it's pretty apparent if you're in a location where it's really, really loud, you're going to want to say, hey, I can't hear you. Can we go somewhere else so I can actually focus on this conversation? You're going to want to get rid of your devices. Your devices are such a physical distraction. They are for all of us. And I can't tell you how many times I've been talking to my husband and I see a notification and I go, yeah. Yeah, no, you can't. You gotta put him down. You gotta break that habit, because the more times even if it looks like you're doing it on the sly, you ever see somebody do this? Yeah, no. Yeah. It's because they're texting with the phone in their lap. So they're trying to make it so you don't see that they're texting, but you know that they are. Just put it away. You don't need it for the short amount of time that you're going to have this conversation, unless you need to look something up, but look it up and then put it away. So identify any physical noises that are occurring in your world, and then find solutions to minimize those noises so that you can better focus on your conversation. And then there's also physiological noises. If somebody wants to talk to you about something super serious, but you don't feel well, you didn't get enough sleep the night before, you've got a booming headache or whatever it is, tell that other person, say, hey, I'd really love to be here for you at this moment, but I feel like shit and I can't focus. That is cool. And it's better that you let them know, because if they don't know that there's something physical going on with you that is interfering with your ability to really be present in the conversation, they're going to make assumptions about why you aren't listening. And those assumptions are probably going to be wrong. So it is up to you to communicate what is going on with you at that moment. And that goes for psychological noise too. And remember, that's the biases, the assumptions, and also the cultural parts of your world that influences how you think and how you communicate to others. So somebody comes up to you and says, I want to get rid of everybody immigrating to the United States right now, because they don't belong here. They're taking away my jobs, and we have COVID. And the last thing we need to do is to bring in more people with this virus. You may totally disagree with that position. So I highly suggest looking at that person going, listen, I hold totally opposing views to yours about immigration. And I just want you to know that before we get into this conversation, because I don't want it to become heated. I don't want us to get in a bad way together. So you should know this is how I feel. So if we're going to talk about that, let's both agree to be as open as we possibly can about this issue rather than shutting each other down. So admitting your biases, admitting those things that are deep-grained values in you up front, that actually helps make the playing field more reasonable. Because if you're able to do that, then the other person knows, hey, I've got a tough customer here. I'm going to have a hard time convincing them of my point of view. Or maybe you know that, oh, I'm going to get really emotional in this conversation and it's not going to go good. So by admitting it up front and saying, hey, this is how I am and this is the way I think, that way both of you can better negotiate meaning and decide whether or not this is a good conversation to have right now at this present time. And the same goes for things like semantic noises, like when you don't understand somebody's language, when you don't understand somebody's culture, you got to come right out and say it. Don't assume you know what the hell those acronyms mean. I can't tell you how many times I get acronyms that are thrown to me in social media, on text messages, and they change so much. I mean, some LOL forever, right? LOL forever. But then there's a whole bunch of other ones that if we are not actively involved in that particular jargon, we're not going to know what the hell is going on. So you can say either A, hey, when you send me an email with acronyms, could you define them for me? Because I don't know all of them and I'm not always sure what you're talking about. Or you can ask somebody just to stay clear of them. Listen, I'm not an acronym person. Please don't use them with me because I get lost and then I don't understand what's going on. And yeah, maybe I should learn a few more, but at this present moment, this is where I'm at. So we have to identify those noises that come with cultural and language-based assumptions. Jargon, acronyms, if somebody can't speak your language, if somebody's from a different culture, all of these things need to be identified so that you can adjust to listen better. And finally, you just got to get all of those biases out of the way. And that's the biggest one. And I've already talked about biases, so I won't talk about it again. I'm not following my notes well. But again, biases is the big one, really. And the more you can identify your own biases, your own assumptions, your own belief system, and how those things can interfere with conversations with other people, people who come from different places, people who come from different sensibilities, the better you're going to be able to communicate. And as we talked about yesterday, clarifying questions are really helpful. How does this make you feel? What is the core of the issue you're trying to communicate about? Who are you talking about? I know lots of Janes. I know tons of Janes. Give me the specific Jane you want to talk about. Which part of the situation are you having trouble with? The only question to avoid are the whys. Now, it's very helpful to understand why somebody feels the way they do. But the problem is, if you're in a heated conversation and you say, well, why the hell did you say that? That's immediately going to cause the other person to be defensive. I said that because you're an asshole. Okay, that's why I said that. So you don't want to make the other person defensive, because once you make the other person defensive, what you do is you ground them deeper into their emotional space, and they're not going to be able to communicate. And oftentimes this ricochets back on you because they're going to say something defensive, then you get defensive, then it's a defensive conversation. And listening pretty much out the window. Not going to happen. So the whys are hard. And you instead of saying, why do you feel that way? You can rephrase it. So how is it that you're feeling this way? How is it affecting you? Using the hows is a really good option here. And that brings me to the next little tiny bit, is that you don't want to compete. Don't compete. When you compete in language, when you compete in intentions, and you make it an active competition between who is right and who is wrong, you have lost the game. We do a lot of competing here in the United States. We do tons of competing here in the United States, and we really need to be careful about that. I compete with my husband all the time, and I didn't even realize it. We'll look at why the vacuum isn't working, and I'll say, no, it's this. And he'll say, no, it's that. Instead of working cooperatively to find out, well, look, it's turned out to be option C on the list. And we waste a lot of time with our competition. Communication isn't a competition. Ultimately, the debate the other night shouldn't have been a competition. Yes, it is a type of competition, but we are looking at competing ideas. So if they could present their ideas clearly and specifically and define what it is they're saying, then the rest of us can determine who has the better ideas. But because they were actively competing about who was the better person on stage, nobody won. Not really. I mean, if somebody really did win, then you'd have a lot of people online saying, what a great debate that was. What an informative experience that was for me, the voter. But they were in a personal competition rather than an idea competition. And as a result, the communication failed. So you need to just kind of pluck out all of these ideas. Ask yourself these questions. How could I listen better right now? Where can we go so we can hear each other better? Why am I distracted in the moment? Is it a physical distraction? Is it a mental distraction? Is it an emotional distraction? Is it what? Figure it out. Identify it for yourself. And if you can't focus well on the conversation at the moment, then it's your responsibility as being part of that moment of shared values, communication, ideas to say, hey, I am not in the place right now to have this conversation. I'm sorry. I know you need it, but I also know that I am so distracted, I'm not going to be able to focus on what you're saying. So instead of avoiding the elephant in the room, take charge of that elephant and paint it pink. And finally, avoid interruptions. Somebody has something to say, let them say it. Avoid what happened in the debate the other day, because the more you interrupt, the less likely there is ever going to be an opportunity for understanding and shared negotiations about meaning. You want to avoid giving advice. You're not being a good listener by giving advice unless it's been asked for. And you can take up that opportunity and say, hey, listen, do you want advice on how to handle this situation, or do you just want me to listen? If you need clarification about whether or not advice is needed, then ask. But otherwise, keep your mouth shut. You may have the best intentions in the world, but especially if somebody is upset, unbidden advice makes them more upset because it feels like they're not being listened to. And if you don't believe me, keep an eye out for this in your own communication efforts. And you might see that it's very true that when people give you unbidden advice, it tends to make you a little bit even more upset. So if you want to give advice, ask the other person, hey, are you looking for advice? And if they say no, you say okay, and you don't do it. You want to make sure that you don't accuse people. What are you, bloody idiot. Are you a stupid idiot? My God, how could you believe that? Don't do that. You do that, and the other person's going to react in kind, and you're not going to have a conversation, let alone any listening. Avoid multitasking. No, you cannot. I know I shouldn't have these negatives in here, but here's the thing. We don't multitask well. When we're younger, it looks like we can because our brains are so flexible. It's so plastic up there that we can quickly move from one activity to the other. But you never listen well when you're texting somebody else on your phone or looking up information or checking the news or figuring out what that last notification was. Don't multitask when you're in the middle of a conversation, even the lightest of conversations, because it distracts from what you're trying to engage in at the moment. And also, you won't enjoy it as much. You're going to miss something. You don't want to miss something. You're engaging with another human being. Be present. And then, okay, of course, don't use short-term thinking. Don't just agree with somebody to get the hell out of the room. If you can't stand the conversation, let them know I am not in the place to have this conversation right now. But thank you. Can we take it up some other time? Because I want to give you my best self and I can't, not at this moment. So, own up to it. Don't try to run away from it. Don't try to pseudo listen and go, oh, yeah, and then have to go, I'm sorry, what did you say? I wasn't listening. So all of these things will help you become better listeners. And we're going to end today on a short meditation. I talked too long. I am sorry. I need to be able to gear a little bit better on how to handle the time. So we're just going to take 5 minutes to have our meditation. And this meditation only needs about 5 to 10 minutes a day. If you do it daily, you're going to become a much better listener. So please get comfortable. Sit in a chair or lie down on the floor or a bed. Close your eyes and take a deep breath all the way to the root of your body. Just focus on your breath. By focusing on your breath, you're going to quiet your brain. Your brain is always going, but just be in control of where you want it to focus. And in this case, on your breath. And when you feel centered, I want you to start noticing all the noises that you are hearing. You may hear cars. There might be a fan going. Maybe there are people out in the street talking. Maybe you hear somebody on a keyboard. Just identify the noises without getting entangled by them, emotionally involved or invested in them. Maybe the noise is intermittent. Maybe it's long-lasting and continuous. Just identify what it is, where it might be coming from, and detect if the noise is having an emotional impact on you at this moment. Right now, I hear the music, the sound of water. I hear my husband typing in the other room. hear the fan behind me or on top of me. I hear sounds coming from my mouth other than words. I can hear my heartbeat. Now I hear my husband on the phone. I think I can hear the air as it's being rotated in the room. This is a simple exercise to learn how to become the observer. You're just identifying the noises, but you're not becoming invested in them. You're just becoming aware, present in your environment. You can use this exercise to start paying attention to what's happening in your body. Are you feeling tight? Are you feeling relaxed? Do you feel a muscle spasm? The more you can still yourself to identify the noises going on in your life, and we have to deal with a lot of noise in this life, the better you're going to be able to distinguish those noises in a conversation, in a moment of communication, whether it's in person, online, digital, video, or just communicating to yourself. This is a powerful tool to develop. Now, open your eyes gently and observe what's in your field of vision without getting entangled with it. Observe the colors around you, the objects in the room. If you get caught up in things like, oh, this room is a mess, I've got to clean them up, then you have actually stepped off the road to this exercise. Don't get involved, no judgments. Just observe what it is and where it is without making judgments. And now wiggle your fingers and your toes. Take a big stretch. And my challenge to you is to make time every day of the week for just 5 minutes to sit and observe without engaging, and see what you can learn from that exercise. It's simple. It'll bring you peace because it's a type of meditation, and it will bring you clarity because it helps bring in understanding. Tomorrow's topic is going to be what is called dramatism. That is, how to best analyze a situation coming from several different points of view. I'll be giving just a general overview of that. And then next Tuesday, we're going to dive into the topic specifically and how it functions and works. Thank you all for joining me today. I am grateful for you. Aloha and mahalo, and of course, namaste.